Yes, welcome back to our YouTube tutorial. This is Mosh Dev Academy, and today we shall be covering how do we create a bottom navigation bar in Flutter. Remember, Flutter is a framework that is used to develop mobile applications, so therefore we are going to see how do we create a bottom navigation bar in Flutter. So remember, there is nothing like any application that you're going to develop where you don't need a navigation. Navigation helps us to move between one screen to the other. Therefore, remember in our last tutorial we looked at how do we create a menu bar or an app bar, which also provides a navigation, where we were able to create an application that can move from one screen to the other. So today we are going to see how do we create a bottom navigation bar. So without wasting time, let us go to the search and then we type in cmd. Remember, this is always our command and the same steps that we use. Looking at my previous tutorials, we are using the same steps. So what we do here, we always just cd to desktop. Cd it means we are changing directory to desktop. Yeah, so we change directory to desktop. Sorry, mind about the spelling. So we shall cd to desktop. Yes, so we have changed our directory to desktop, and remember, we want to create our fresh application where we shall be implementing the bottom navigation bar. So in this aspect, one, you need internet connection, and you can see mine here. I have internet connected because the Flutter application we're going to create, it needs to pick some online dependencies. So the command to create a Flutter application is very simple. You run Flutter, then create. So since we want to create a bottom navigation bar, therefore my project name is going to be called bottom navigation. So we are going to call my project bottom navigation, and I'll simply click on run, that is enter. So by clicking on the enter button, it helps you to create a Flutter application. So you can see that in my dark terminal, we are trying to install all the necessary dependencies, and within just a minute, our project is ready, and we can now close the terminal so that we can look at our desktop and we can locate our project folder. So looking at the desktop, you can see that our project folder is here. So what we are going to do is to open this project in VS Code. So to open this project in VS Code, you simply just double click and you navigate to the path, you write in cmd, then code space dot. So this is how you can open your project. Of course, you have several other ways how you can open your project in Flutter, but I would choose to go with this one, which is so simple. You just run to that command, and you can see that right now we are inside our Flutter application. As I told you in the first place, that always when you create a Flutter application, by default it will create all these folders and files, but for us we shall spend much of our time in the lib folder. So within the lib folder, by default, when you create a Flutter application, it creates what we call the main.dat. Yeah, it creates the main.dat, where we write all our file, rather our code that we want to implement. But you can as well create multiple other files, but for now we are going to simply just remove everything which is inside here. So we can just simply remove everything here, and then we write everything from scratch. Remember, this tutorial, we're going to see how do you create a bottom navigation. So I'm going to first disable my internet because I want to be able to write these codes from scratch. As a junior developer, it should always be a good practice for you to be able to write codes from scratch. Do not over rely on AI. Leave AI for only when you're making research, more so when you're a junior developer. But for advanced developers, like senior developers, it might be okay for them to use AI because already they understand things from basics. So for us to be able to be solid in this journey, let us be writing everything from scratch. So what we do, remember, when you are creating a Flutter application, when you're creating a UI component, we always first import. So we are going to import. We are going to perform an import, and what are we importing? We are going to import a material.dat, and we import it from package, then Flutter. Yes, so you import from Flutter, and then you import main material.dat. So this is, remember, always this line of statement imports the UI libraries like the bottom navigation links, the buttons, the texts, the labels. So everything that you're going to use, you shall always use that material dot dart. Then from there you have to create what we call a main entry point. So to create a main entry point in Flutter, you simply just write void then main, which is a function that you must activate, and then you create the curly braces. So within this main function, you always call your run app, which is a default app package function rather, that is helping you to build your Flutter UI application. So from here we're going to call my app. It's always a practice that we call my app, but doesn't mean that every time we shall be calling it my app. But for now, let us simply just call this one as my app. So remember, here we are at least trying to create an object, and within this we must create a class for this, because this class is going to act as a root widget. The class we call here, it is the root widget, which helps the Flutter application to build. So when you're running your application, by default it checks in the main.dart, and it is looking for the main entry point, which is the main function, which was assigned a role of running your Flutter application. So since we have created that my app, we need to create a class for it. And to create a class in Flutter, we use a reserved keyword class, then my app, yes, and it's going to extend. So it always extends a stateless what? A stateless widget. So we're going to extend a stateless widget, as you can see, and then we use the curly braces. So what we are trying to perform here is a basic principle of programming, which is known as inheritance. So in inheritance, you always pick everything that is existing in this class stateless widget. Those are the attributes and the functions, and you're trying to inherit them, so that now the class my app can inherit everything within the stateless what? Widget. Remember, I told you we have two categories of widget. We can either use a stateful widget or a stateless widget. In scenarios where you're using a stateless widget, that's when you feel like you don't want any change in that UI component. So since right now we are creating a root widget, there is no need of using a stateful widget. We're going to see how to use a stateless full widget in this tutorial today, and I'll be explaining thorough in the details, so for you to be able to understand why we need a stateless widget. So whenever you inherit, you need to override, because by default when you inherit, you're going to realize that it creates for you by default what we call it comes along with its functions, and you have to override them, so that you can only now whenever you need a function, that's when you should call it. So that's why we override. So after overriding, we need to build this widget by using what we call a build function. But a build function is picked from what we call a widget, then you use build, which is a built-in function, and within this built-in function it inherits two attributes. One is a build context, then the other one is a context. Yeah, so one is a build context, then the other one is a context. Then you simply now use the curly braces. So within these curly braces, we are going to return, we always return, yes, what we return is what we call a material what? A material app, which acts as like the base layout. The base layout, it is equivalent to your HTML skeleton. So we shall be using this material app, and within the material app, if you don't want the other debug bar, you can always ask your debug check mode, which is a boolean, and you set it to false. Then from there, you're going to use the home, which is a widget, and you're going to say maybe at home I want this one to always pick what we call the main what? The main screen. So the main screen is going to be like our default screen, which is going to display whenever we launch our Flutter application. So having created this one as main screen, so in this scenario it is picked as an object, but it is a class. So remember, for us to create an object, we need a class, right? Because an object is an instance of a class. So having created a main screen here, so we have to go down here outside the root widget. This is acting as a root widget. We need to create what we call a class main screen. So we shall use a reserved keyword class, then we pick what we call the main what? The main screen, and it's this time around it's going to extend. Now you can see that when we are creating a root widget, we used what we call a stateless widget. But when you're creating what we call this main screen, since it's the screen which is going to handle this navigation within our bottom, like remember we are going to create items at the bottom, and we want to have those, for example, the profile, the home, the setting. So we want that when you click, let's say, on home, we are able to navigate the home screen. When you click on, let's say, about, or maybe profile or setting, we are able to navigate, but everything is happening within the main screen. So the main screen is going to inherit a stateful widget. Why? Because the state within that main screen will keep on changing anyway as we are navigating. So let us import from a stateful widget. Instead of a stateless, we are going to import from a stateful widget. Yeah, then from there, of course, whenever you import, whenever you extend, you must always override. So whenever you extend, you must always override. So I will always override. Then after overriding, I'm going to use, let's say, I'm going to create a variable which is main page state. So I'm going to create my variable as main page state. Yes, and I'm going to use a create state function, which is provided by Flutter, so that I'm able to create a state. Remember, I want to create a stateful widget which is going to help me manage the state, the different scenarios. Whenever the user is clicking on the bottom links, is able to navigate between screens. So I'm using this variable main page state, and I'm using a create state function to create for me this state. Therefore, I'm going to simply just call this as a class. So having created this line of code, what we are trying to implement is, assuming you have your mobile application, for example, those who have used maybe Safe Border before, you're going to realize that at the bottom we have those different, like a Safe Border, Safe Car, and maybe the e-wallet. Yeah. Now those bottom navigation links, basically they are screens within a main screen. So when you click, they are equivalent to your tabs when you're looking at the HTML knowledge. So whenever you click on, let's say, on Safe Border, like maybe on home, on profile, or on setting, you're simply calling the other screen to display, but it is displaying within the main screen. So the entire concept is, within the main screen, we create what we call a state. And the state we are creating, we should manage. The state we are creating is helping us to achieve the navigation between these different screens that we are going to be selecting. That's why we are using this create state function, and then it points to this. So what you create here as your variable is what you pick as you associate it with the same variable name. It inherits the same name, and then you call it like a class. But having created it here as a class, you must come here down and then you create a class for it. So I'm going to create a class which is still the same, because I want to create this class. Therefore, I'm calling the same name. And this time around it's going to extend, but instead of extending a stateful widget, it extends the state because we are creating a state. Yeah. What we are trying to implement here is, you're trying to say that now we want to have a main screen which is going to act as like the wrapper. Now all other screens are going to fit in this main screen. Now to manage these different screens, so that when I click on one item at the bottom, it can navigate and displays the screen that I want to go to, it means that I must create a state within that main screen, which we are trying to create. So now we use the create state function, and we have associated it with a class create main page state, which is this one. Now below here we want to create that particular class, and it is going to extend a state, but this state you must point where the state is going to happen, and it's going to happen at the main at the main screen. That's how you associate it. Then you use the curly braces. Now looking at this line of code, we are simply implementing that as we are extending this state, it's going to happen on the main screen. That's why we are extending a state, and then we are saying we are pointing at the main at the main screen. Then from there you're going to create another variable which is going to manage our different states, and I'm going to call it maybe selected item. So I'm creating my variable by using an int data type, and I'm going to first initialize it with 0, meaning by default it's going to auto select 0 as the first alternative. So having created this variable, I'm going to have a list. Using the final keyword, I'm going to create a list of all the screens that I want to navigate to. But these screens, they come from a widget class. Yeah, that's why I associate it with a widget. Sorry, the spelling of the widget. Yeah. Then from there you're going to create a variable. Maybe you can call it pages. Then you create an empty array. So we're going to pass arrays within this, because we are trying to create a list of those different screens we are going to navigate to. So I might have my first screen as home screen. Yes, I'm going to have my first screen as home screen. Then I might have my second screen as settings screen. Yeah, so I'm going to have these two screens. Ideally, what we are trying to implement is, now we are trying to create those screens that are going to fit within the main screen, where I will have at the bottom the home, the settings, and maybe the profile. So by clicking on home, it will navigate me back to the home page, but within the same main screen. So everything is going to happen within one screen, but we shall be able to display different content which is residing on that particular screen. Now the idea here is, remember when you create what you call an array, elements within arrays are assigned positions. For example, in this scenario, where you see the home screen, it is occupying position 0. The settings screen is occupying position 1. So when I say that int selected item is going to be 0, by default, I'll be displaying the home screen as my first screen. Anyway, we're going to see this. Let us first proceed. So as having created a list here, I must now create what we call a function. I'm going to create my function, which is going to be, the function is going to be on tapped item. So I'm going to create a function which is on tapped item. Okay, then from here I'm going to set a state, because now we created a state up there. Now we must set what? A state. So I create a state and I set a state. Now setting a state here, we are simply saying, since we are going to manage states within our main screen, now all the items, each time you're going to create you're going to tap on an item, for example home or on profile or on setting, it's going to be picking that particular state, and it's going to re-update our UI component to display that particular screen based on the item we have selected at the bottom. Remember, those items are going to be passed as arrays, and each item within an array, it occupies a position. Now when I click on home, having home as my first screen, it's going to have position 0. When I go to profile, for example, is my second screen, it's going to have position 1. When I go to setting, it is my third screen, it's going to have position 2. So that means now when we create a state, we should be able to manage a state, and a function to manage a state is known as setState. Yeah, now because here we are creating a function which is on tapped, that whenever I tap on that item, what should happen? I'm going to pass a parameter here which is an int value, and it's going to have our index. So within here I'm going to have my selected my selected item, and I'm going to equate it to the index. Ideally, what we are trying to create here is, by default the selected item is 0 when you look at line 20, but we are trying to assume that when I click on, let's say on the second item on the bottom navigation link, it's going to have position 1, meaning I should be able to update the selected item using the set state. Yeah, they are what we call, how do we manage states in Flutter? We manage states in Flutter by always updating the component so that it can display that particular item which is residing on the component that we have selected. So the idea within this function void, which is the untapped item, is we pass here an int value, and it is having what we call an index, which is a variable to temporarily hold the value of that particular item that we have selected. Then from there, when I select on item 1, it's going to pick that value and it's going to assign it 1 here. And we have said that now the selected item, whenever it changes, it's going to pick that new value and it will equate it to the selected item. So meaning when I pick 1, the new selected item is no longer 0, it's going to become what? 1. So when I assign 1 here, it's going to come within my array, and it looks for that particular screen which is occupying position what? Position 1. So in this scenario, instead of us displaying home screen, which is going to come by default, it's going to go ahead and it picks the settings screen, because it's the one which is occupying position what? Position 1. Then from there, what we do, we are still within the main page state, which is a class. We are going to override. Remember, whenever you inherit, you should always override. But here the reason as why I had not yet written this, it's because now I was simply just writing some functions up here, and now I was not yet building what? the UI component. But at this moment I should build the UI component, but after overriding. So I'm going to override, then I use a widget, because it's the widget which provides me with the build function. And this build function is a function which inherits two attributes, one being what? The build context, and then its attribute, which is context, not content, it's context. Then from there we are going to return, yeah, we are going to return. Now all along we have been returning a scaffold here instead, yeah, but today we are going to return what we call a safe area. Now the reason that's why we are returning the safe area is there are scenarios where you're developing your mobile application, but based on different screen sizes, the content within the application might not display fully, because we have different screen sizes, and on your device it might be displaying properly, but on client's device it's not displaying properly. Now for you to achieve all the media queries just like equivalent to HTML, what you do, use what we call a safe area. For it, it always determines the screen size, and it will see how it can manage the content to fit within the visible areas of the screen. So I'm going to use what we call a safe what? A safe area, yeah. So when I use a safe area, of course, now within the safe area inside, that's where I'm going now to pass what? That's where I'm going to pass my what? My scaffold, because always you should use a scaffold by default. You should always a scaffold, because the scaffold is equivalent to your container. So everything we want to have must be declared within a scaffold, yeah. So within this scaffold, there are two things that I'm going to first pick. One, I'm going to look for my body, which is a widget, and this body is going to pick now the other pages. The pages, remember, it's like the array which has what we call the pages that you want to display, these pages here. So at the body, we want by default the content which is going to display in the body section of our screen is going to be the content which is residing on these different screens that we are having here. So therefore within here I'm going to call my selected item, because it's the selected item. I'm going to call my selected item value attribute. Reason being that now the state we are managing is being managed by the selected item here, and the selected item is picking the integers, that is 0, 1, 2 up to infinity, based on how many items you're going to have within your bottom navigation link. But now these positions, rather these integers we are picking here, they are simply mimicking what we call the positions. They are simply calling the positions within the array. So having two screens within the array, the first screen is occupying position 0, and the second screen is occupying position 1. So when we launch our application by default, it's going to pick the selected item. Now having initiated or initialized our selected item to be 0, by default it will first display the content on the home screen. But when you click on the new item, for example the settings, it's going to come and pick the new value of the setting in terms of position, and it is going to reassign the selected item value with that new value it has picked. Then from there, after this, we are going now to use now what we call the current. We are going to pick the bottom. Now we need to pick the bottom navigation bar, yeah, which is an attribute, and it inherits a class bottom what? Navigation bar. It's within now this bottom navigation bar that we are going to write the actual elements that we want to use. But before that, we need to pick the current index, and then we assign it to the selected what? The selected item, yeah, the current index, and we pick the selected item. Then from there, we also want to use the on tap, because we want to be able to click on those particular items and they can display, and we are going to self-reference the on tapped item, which is a function that we have above here. Then from there, the other thing we need is now the real items, and they are known as, we are going to use the items, which is an array, yeah. Then from there we are going to pass a const. Then from a const, now having created this array, we need now to pick the exact items. So there is an attribute which is called a bottom navigation bar items, which we are going to create. For instance, I'm going to inherit from the icons class. This is equivalent to your icons class within. This is equivalent to your font awesomes in HTML. So when you see icon, Flutter by default it provides us with some libraries and tools, for example the icons. So I can simply just go within the Flutter and I pick any icon that I want. For example, right now I want to create a home tab, so therefore I'm going to use the .home. Then from there, from using the .home, I'm going to put a comma and then I pick, yeah, it is from the icon, it's not icon, it's from the icons class. I pick the .home, then I use a label because I want it to have a label, and the label is going to be home. Then from there I'm going to create my second item. Remember, in our screens we have two items, therefore I'm going to copy this and I will simply just edit. Instead of having home, this time around I want to create for the settings, so therefore I'm going to have this one as settings. Then this one also I'm going to edit its content to settings. Yeah, so now I have this. I've created these two items which are going to be matching with these items we are passing within the list. But you can see that within our main.dat we are still seeing this red line. These are bugs, but you as a developer shouldn't always be fearing bugs. Whenever you see a red line, it's an opportunity for you to learn. Whenever you see a red line, don't fear. It is always an opportunity for you to learn. So I must create these different screens so that now I can easily import, so that we can see that now these red lines will go away. So to create these two screens, I'm going to have a new file. Yeah, one is going to be called HomeScreen. So I'll just simply write it as HomeScreen.dat. Yeah, then from here still I'll use the import, and I'm going to import from package, then Flutter, then material.what, because always we need this material.dat. Then from there we're not going to create a main function, because always we declare once the main function and shouldn't declare it anywhere. So I'm going to simply just create a class, create a class using a class reserved keyword, and we are going to call it HomeScreen. And this HomeScreen is going to extend a stateless widget. We are creating a stateless widget, and we are going to override, of course we are going to override and build. So within the build we are going to return, we are simply going to return, and we're going to return a scaffold. Yeah, we're going to return a scaffold, and we just need a simple content. Yeah, we're going to return a scaffold, and we simply just use a center. Okay, sorry, we are going to use a body, then center, then we are just going to use a text within here. Okay, sorry, we're going to have center, then child, then from child we use a text. Yeah, then from a text you simply say I want this text to be showing me that this is home screen. So I want to be able to identify which is the home screen and which is not the home screen. So after that you simply save, and you can simply copy this code and you create another screen for the settings. So I'm going to have my settings.dat. So you can call it settings.dat or settingscreen.dat. So from there you simply going to change this one. Instead of home screen, it's going to be settings screen. Yeah, you're going to have it as settings screen, and also this content is going to change to settings screen. So we are simply just doing this because I'm quite sure that we have been doing this and this is not news to you. So having created these two screens, I have the settings, I have the home, but still you can go back to our main.dat and it is still complaining. So the reason as why it is complaining, it is simply because we have just created these two screens by creating these two files, but we have not yet imported. So to import, you should always go up here where you imported the material.dat, and you simply import these two lines. For example, we can begin with the home setting. We can see that the moment we import the home screen, you can see that the red line which was on this class has moved away. So you can do the same thing to our settings.dat, and now our screen is okay. So having created all this, you can now simply try to run your app so that you can be sure whether all the efforts we have been doing, they have yield something. So I'm going to connect my internet back, because for me to be able to run my Flutter application, I must have internet. So I'm going to connect my internet back. so that now I can simply come here. Remember, when you're running a Flutter application, always go to this main.dat and you run from there. So I'm going to choose any device, and for now I'm going to choose my Chrome. I'm going to choose my Chrome. So you give it some few seconds or some few minutes. It's going to build and we shall be able to display the content. We shall be able to see whether we have achieved what we have been looking for. Remember, we are building a bottom navigation link in Flutter, and today I've introduced what we call a stateful widget. How do we create and manage states in Flutter? How are we able to create and manage states in Flutter? So that's what we are simply doing today, and we are just waiting to see whether our application can run. Yes, you can see that now the browser is open. We are yet to see what we have been building, and that's what we are waiting to see. Of course, it is taking some time. As you know, it is doing some background checks, and if everything is okay, yes, you can see that now we have our bottom navigation, which is here. So I can navigate between screens. You can see that the content which is displaying here is for settings. I can navigate back to home screen. So we are able to navigate back and forth using the bottom navigation link. So what we have done in summary, let me just summarize this. What we have simply done was, first of all, to import all the necessary files. We created the main function. We created a root widget, as you can see. Then we had to create what we call a main screen, which is like acting as a wrapper, which is going to manage and maintain our states within the UI component. We have created that main page state, which is now the exact state we are managing. We have passed those different screens that we want to move or to switch in between. We have created a function that is going to help us tap those particular items. Then from there, we have created the exact bottom navigation links with its items listed here. Like, for example, right now we have created for home and setting, and you can create as many as you want, but always in design, don't overcrowd the bottom navigation. So that's what we have been working on. See you in the next video.